Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Love It to Shove It. It's me, Irina Portnova, here with my co-host Bruno Gill, and we have the guest today, Kerri Lewis. And welcome back, Kerri, because we haven't seen you for a while. Kerri, say a couple of words about yourself and what you're doing.
Yeah, well, first off, oh my God, the introduction had me chuckling. I love it. It's so real. And, I tend to drop some F-bombs. So I'm like, yeah, I love that. I love this title to it. All right, guys, thank you first off, Irina and Bruno, for this beautiful opportunity to connect with you, amazing souls, because energy attracts energy, and it is a gift and a privilege to me. It's interesting. I have a hard time calling myself anything these days because it's hard to encompass what I do. But really, I feel like I inspire and role model the behavior needed so that people can show up and get curious about why they behave the way they do, and then start to examine beliefs, habits, and old, systems of behavior, and learn about themselves so they can truly be themselves. Because when you're yourself, you don't suffer, So I work a lot with people who struggle with addiction and mental health issues, pervasive issues, helping them to start to give themselves permission to get curious and break free from their suffering, so to speak.
Oh my God, I just love it. Especially, I love it how you said that, to really discover who you are, because a lot of people think that they know, but we do not know. And even when we are, jump on that discovery stage, it's still like so many layers to each one of us. And we are constantly changing because that's exactly how the energy is, right? So whoever we were a couple of years ago, we are not the same person that we are today. And the idea is that we keep discovering ourselves. As long as we are breathing, we are constantly discovering something new about ourselves, right? What our likes, what our beliefs, because everything can change, like I said. So there is no such a thing that, done, right, for forever. So, and it's beautiful, like you just put it together, like saying that when we are not ourselves, we suffer.
Yes, it's so true.
And and what comes for me is just like, I think the huge freedom is the freedom to be yourself and express yourself to the fullest without the fear of judgment or being misunderstood.
Well, you will be, but you are so centered in your own confidence that it doesn't matter. You know what
exactly.
I mean?
Exactly.
I really encourage people to do the work, because so often we're wearing different hats. I was told recently, I see this beautiful person, but they show up one way in their business and another way in their personal life. And I said, well, then you're not truly being you, because you should be the same. You're going to get the same Kerri at the concert I was at on Saturday, at the board of directors meeting that I was at, and with my clients, or having fun. And in doing that, there's a freedom, because you don't have to filter, nor are you watching how you behave for fear that you might step out of the box that you put yourself in that situation.
I love this. And I love our discussion, but let's just jump on board, because Kerri, you were the one to suggest that topic, right? Going back to love and relationships, and let's talk about courage to be vulnerable, to be fragile, right? Because a lot of people see it as the weakness. Yeah. That's why a lot of times people put on the mask. They just shield themselves. They don't want for others to know who they are, right? To know their true feelings and to be vulnerable, and how actually it's important.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. I brought this topic up for two reasons, because two situations presented themselves in my own life in this past week, where in one experience, because I hadn't been vulnerable enough and had the awareness to be vulnerable, I exploded, and I haven't yelled at anybody in years, but it was my lack of being able to say, hey, this is a non-negotiable, and I continue to not hold true to my boundary, and as a result I behaved very poorly. There's no regret, because it was an opportunity for me to dial in my boundaries and get curious. And then another situation happened with my boyfriend, who is my everything. But I was really emotional that day. I'm going through perimenopause, which is a whole interesting situation because your hormones are all over the place. And my boyfriend posted a seemingly innocent picture. It really was, but it was like me like eating with like, it was the worst picture you could possibly have of a person. And he posted it. And I'm like, I was really tight. One, I was emotional, but two, I know full well if I posted a picture of him that he didn't view as flattering, it would bother him, right? So I sat with that all day, and I struggled because on one hand, I'm an ego and I take responsibility, right? If I'm sitting there worried about this picture, then now I'm in ego and fear, and there's that real truth, and I recognize and honor that. On the other hand, it did evoke emotion in me, and so do I share that with him, right? Because I'm contending with this throughout the day, or do I not? And because I'm me, and I know that I have to speak my truth, I eventually said, as seemingly silly as this is, and I totally get it, and I totally recognize that in the big picture of things, it's a trivial matter. It bothered me, particularly because, that's not something I would really do to you. And in that conversation, we were able to continue to deepen our level of intimacy and honesty. And while some might say that's silly, it's not, because those little micro things within relationships, unsaid, can build and build and build over time into something like the other situation that I had with my sister-in-law, where I exploded and behaved in a way that was not loving, was not kind, and was not supportive to creating a deeper, meaningful relationship within us, within our relationship.
Wow, such a great share. And you know what, Kerri, I think we all get screwed up from time to time, right? Because it's part of our human experience. But at the same token, it's great to have that level of awareness, like you do recognize, right, where you have to step up, or where you have to like really have your boundaries, or where you just have to have the conversation, right? It's all about having the tools and kind of knowing to have that reflection, and knowing what to say and in which manner to say it. Because I always say, you can speak the same words, but it's all about the tone of your voice and the way you actually say that, right? That matters a lot.
Absolutely. And taking responsibility, because again, at the end of the day, if we're being honest, everything that we feel inside is a projection, right? Meaning, like, it's all an internal narrative within myself, and I realize that, right? But also, I am in communication and in relationship with others, and I value those relationships. So for me, it's important to communicate what's going on, even if, even when I know, like, it is a me issue. It's a me issue. I've got to process it. I've got to look at where I have work to do, but also letting other people know so that they know where I stand, because that to me is true intimacy. That to me is real vulnerability and being able to just be honest with other people.
Absolutely. Bruno, what's your point on that?
It's funny because like Jesus Christ, like I did exploded as well. Exploded this week very much. It was like either yesterday or 2 days ago. So I'm in the middle of the city, right? And well, there was some things going on, right? And I just remember like opening the the window, right? Because I was so like overwhelmed. I was so fed up. I I opened the window and I just screamed to an entire city that, look, shut the fuck up, or I will kill you all right now. And like, the worst about it is that I really meant it. Like the worst about it that I really meant it, because you have people, when they're emotionally safe, they say certain things that when they're emotionally unsafe, they would never say. And then you have people that have the opportunity to be emotionally unsafe, and then they become it, and they do it, right? But you're so in your ego and you're so hot-headed that, you know, even if you know the consequences about your actions, you're so like out of it completely, so like you don't see anything else in front of you but what what your ego is telling you, that like. And I feel like for me, what has helped me many times to prevent that happening, because there's times where I could prevent it, and there was other times where I just could not prevent it, because of how overwhelmed I was, right? But the times that I could prevent it, I actually, before I did that, right, I stepped back and I asked myself, why are you feeling this way, right? And that completely changed my whole perception, because I went from focusing on how I was feeling to focusing on how I could learn from that emotion, right? And it takes a lot of courage, because your ego, like, the problem with ego is that, like, the ego makes us believe that you have this solution and this solution only, that comes from a either trauma-based situation, or it comes from a self-defensive situation, that your body and your nervous system is basically treating like life or death, right? Because that's how you programmed yourself, right? Kerri knows that a lot because she deals with that, right? And so in my instance, I was severely traumatized twice by the end of 2022. Apart from all the other traumas anyways, but one was in a bus where I actually believed I was in a like life or death situation, and with myself, not other people, but like with myself. But it was all just intimidation. It wasn't actually for real. And it was, yes, and then it was like on a different country. It was on a restaurant, right? And so I was vulnerable in both of those situations. I was fragile, right? This topic is courage and fragility, right? So I was fragile, I was vulnerable, right? But my problem, and the problem with a lot of people, is that I saw my vulnerability as a fragility, right? Because I didn't know what to do. You know that quote where it says, like, when you know the game, you don't panic? That's super true. I did not know what was going on, and I didn't know how to fucking do anything. So I just felt fucked completely. I just felt super fucked, right? And it's funny because the universe tested me again after some months to know if I could deal with the situation, and I dealt with it better. Why? Because I knew what was going to happen. I had experience. That time I had no experience. Now I had the experience and I succeeded, thank God, right? But I also succeeded because I never saw vulnerability as a weakness, right? But you end up seeing vulnerability as a weakness in a situation where you don't know how to be vulnerable with it. Because, right? Because, for example, if I'm sitting down with a person and the person requires my vulnerability, I'm not going to show no fear in a physical way or spiritual way, right? I'm going to show no fear in a communicative way, right? But if I'm on a life or death situation, I'm going to, either hold my ground and then I'll just get the fuck out, or, or something. Or if I have no other options but to do something, I'll do something, but I have to show no fear because people eat that. People can smell it. People see it, right? And it's all an energetical type of game, right? So you show vulnerability. Vulnerability comes out of you in different situations, right? But at the same time, real people are not single faceted, right? Real people don't have just one face, they have multiple faces. Why? Because in a certain situation, I'm going to show myself in a way which is my real self, but my real self in a completely different situation can be a completely different self, right? So I'm not saying like, oh, real people are multifaceted, but not in the fake way, but more in the way that I am in different situations, right? I can be serious in my own way and be funny in my own way, but those two ways are completely different from each other, right? Which means you're two different people, right? So multifaceted, again, not in the fake way, but more in the realist way, right? And so this is what I believe, right? But it takes a lot of courage, to be fragile, because especially if you're in a possible, very potential traumatic situation, right? You have all that tension and anxiety inside of you that you're contained and you don't know how to release it, and it can be very, very tough, right? But to be vulnerable and to be fragile, right? Like I feel like it depends, like fragility and vulnerability. I feel like being fragile or being vulnerable is almost the same thing, but I feel like fragility has a more negative connotation in my personal view than really vulnerability, right? Because when you're fragile, you're not being authentic. When you're fragile, right, in the most common sense, it's more like weakness, but vulnerability is authenticity, right? Because you can connect more the word vulnerability to the word authentic, to the authentic type of word, in my personal belief. But I feel like it's almost like how people put it, and how things are said, and how you show yourself to the world, no fear, right? You say fuck it, because I mean we're all dying soon. I feel like we're all already dead anyways, completely. In my own view, because the planet has been going on for like billions of years, right? And we have like 100-year life expectancy. So like, what the fuck is that? Like that's like 2-3 generations. And what we're saying right now, even the people that are listening to this right now, in like 2 or 3 generations, nobody's gonna remember a fucking thing, right? Completely. And so it's like bravery is done for hard things. But when you see that, like, when you see the benefits of something that is hard doing, it stops being so hard, because the benefits outweigh how hard it is, right? Especially when you have proof. Me, Irina, Kerri, right? We're all people that we don't really look at how hard it is. We see the benefits and then we do it, right? And that outweighs, and we are the example that it works, right? And so being vulnerable is a tool if well used, but if not, it can damage you, right? But it's not being vulnerable that is damaging you. It's your idea of what vulnerability is, the way you are vulnerable. And for example, Kerri touched in boundaries, right? If you're vulnerable, you gotta have boundaries. It's like it pushes you to have boundaries, because if you're very vulnerable, which is very good, right? But you don't have boundaries, soon enough something is gonna push you, right, for you to have boundaries. And hopefully it doesn't have to destroy your peace, right? Because with me, it destroyed my peace multiple times. And I only learned last time, and I know that right now everything is fine. But yeah, I mean, right? But being vulnerable is super important. We gotta have the boundaries.
Kerri, what comes to you?
What? So much stuff. I don't equate vulnerability with fragility or frailty at all. And I think that there's a very big distinction between the two. You touched upon it, right? Vulnerability, I think, is one of the greatest signs of strength that there is. The same as asking for help, right? I tied the two in together, and I think back to my many years in corporate America where I, was climbing, the ladder. And the reason I was able to do so was because I had no fear of asking for help. Kind of like you, for me, I had to be successful to survive. And so it was a non-negotiable. Fear didn't play into the equation. And that also taught me the importance of being vulnerable. I think when we're talking about vulnerability within relationships, vulnerability can be as simple as speaking your truth, meaning, hey, Bruno, I didn't quite understand what you meant when you were talking about vulnerability and frailty, right? That's vulnerability because you could easily turn around and pop off. But in being able to share that, right, I'm then able to build a deeper connection and understanding as to where you're coming from and how I can show up for you in a meaningful way, whether it's communicate in a different manner, speak clearly, things of that nature. And that's why I think, vulnerability is truly being able to conversate and express what is going on internally, externally with the people who are really meaningful in your life so that they can understand you in a better way, and then either meet your needs or not. And then going back to the other, experience I had where I popped off, boundaries is something I'm very good at, but I created this story in my mind that I could bend on a boundary because I was helping this person. This person needed help regularly. And I'm like, all right, well, if they need help, da da da. And so I don't regret this situation because I also think that there's so much beauty and benefit in the experience. Because then I get to learn, oh, okay, so I've made this story that I get to waver on boundaries because I'm helping somebody. No, I don't. And then you just continue to learn what feels really good for you. Much like you said, Bruno, I continue to learn what keeps me in peace. And anything that does not bring peace to me, I just shed. It doesn't serve me, and I let it go. And in that is being vulnerable too, because the conversation that I'm going to have with this person, we haven't seen each other, is I'm no longer able to help you, not because I don't love you, but because there's a potentiality of that disrupting my peace, and that is more important to me than anything else. What about you, Irina? What are your thoughts on vulnerability?
Oh my God. Yes, I just love what you shared, Kerri, and it's so true. And I could totally relate, like asking questions, right? The power of asking. And it goes back to the society that I even remember when I was working in the corporate, it was like, oh, don't ask the questions because it seems like you are not qualified for the position you were hired, right? And the thing is, like, it's very expected because, you're coming to different industry, you're coming to different, like playground. Obviously, you want to know what each toy is, right? So you have to get yourself to know, right? So basically, I was never also shy to ask the questions. And that's exactly what our society is teaching us. And our society actually teaching us how to be, separate from each other because we are so freaking independent. There is no need to ask for help. There is no need for you to, need anybody in your life. You can do it totally yourself. And that's where you see like a lot of people, going through stress, through the depression, through all of these things because they feel like they can handle it themselves. But we are not wired to handle it on ourselves.
Yeah.
We were not meant for that, right? We were meant to be together. We were meant to have these communities. We were meant to have the people who are next to us to allow us to go through whatever experience we are going through. And I love how you said with the vulnerability, like if I don't know something, like even go into the workforce, if I didn't understand something, I would be like bold, like, screw that. If somebody thinks I'm stupid, that's fine, but at least I have the answer for my question.
Yeah.
And that's where vulnerability comes from. It's like, just don't nod your head, and just show up that you understand everything. If you do not, just speak up and just be honest, right? Because I think when we are vulnerable, first of all, we are honest with ourselves before we honest with everybody else.
Yeah.
It's better to ask the question than fuck it. Because if you don't ask the question, oh no, don't do it because doesn't sound right. Oh yeah, but then I fucked it, and then you have everybody fall on you, and then the same person who told you that be like, oh, you should have asked the question. You told me not to. What the fuck? Like,
Yeah.
what is wrong with you? Like, Jesus.
Well, I mean, I think that comes back to just being comfortable in your own skin. And again, it's a practice, and here's the thing, I tell people all the time, the reality is you're gonna get rejected and people will judge you. Look at me. I'm covered
Exactly.
in tattoos. I have a tore up shirt. I show up with my clients like this. I show up for podcasts like this. I show up for meetings. But the reality is I would rather show up the way that feels super good for me and because then I attract the people who are meant for me in the first place. If I'm not vulnerable, if I'm not true to who I am, then I may be attracting people, but they're not the ones for me. And then I open up myself for relationships that are based on superficiality, which long term doesn't serve anybody because my needs aren't being met, your needs aren't being met. And I think also when it comes to being vulnerable, it is incredibly important to getting your needs met within relationships, right? My boyfriend, I'm vulnerable about everything, whether it's how we perform making love, to what I need about dinner, to, space. Hey, I have nothing nice to say to the world today, so I'm not going to be around you because I love you too much, right? It's being comfortable having any conversation, regardless of what it is. And in doing so, I get my needs met. Or, and I know I shared this at another show with you, I find out that person isn't the person who can meet my needs, which is just
Totally.
beautiful, because now I have a choice and I can decide, oh, okay, cool. You have every right to operate this way. My job is not to change you, but I have every right to expect this for my life. And so I'm going to exit so that I can get my needs met from somebody who can give me what it is I'm looking for.
I just love what you share, because I know there's going to be a lot of viewers who would be like, wow, she is brave. Because it does take a lot of courage in being vulnerable, just to admit it, right, to yourself in the first place, and then just to deliver to that person saying, hey, you know what, we can't just function like that together because it doesn't serve me.
Yeah. And think about it long term, then I'm not serving that person's needs either, right? Because I'm building up resentment, which what does that do? That produces negative energy. To what Bruno was saying, you can't fake energy. I can sit here and put on a false persona, but the reality is anybody who is tapped in even a little is going to know, ooh, she may say she's all happy but she's not, and that's not fair. That doesn't create a situation where people feel safe, because now you're being told one thing, but you energetically feel something else. And so it's kind of like a mind fuck. Now you're trying to question. And that to me is the biggest thing, is I would rather be super honest and say something really embarrassing. Hey, I need you to meet this need or whatever, than potentially make it so that somebody who's in a space with me is making up stories because I'm not able to speak my truth to them.
Totally. I so agree with you. And it's just like such a great, fact of awareness for a lot of people. Because like even growing up, like our parents wanted us to be a certain way, especially for the girls, right? We have to be good. We have to listen to everybody. We have to be polite. We have to do everything right. And who asked us what we want? Nobody did, right? And we were growing up just under this impression that this is the way to live, because this way we would be loved, right?
Yeah.
But then it's all about just, like harsh truth to be discovered, and start like really digging and figuring out, and just like peeling all these layers that were put on us, figuring out like what exactly is something that is true to me.
Exactly. And that takes time and practice. And, just like Bruno and myself, I think vulnerability is also saying, hey, we popped off. In our industry, the reality is I think some people put coaches or psychiatrists or doctors or whatever is having it all figured out. Hell no. Hell no. The reality is it is a journey. And when you are able to say, oh yeah, I totally lost my cool. And not only did I lose my cool, I scared my daughter. And that was a tough pill for me, because my daughter hadn't seen her mom that angry since I was with my ex-husband. And at that time, she felt very unsafe. It was a very volatile situation, right? But sharing that with your community, I think, is incredibly important, because that's the truth. That's how you learn yourself. That's how you get clarity around what feels good for me. What layer do I need to peel back now? What do I need to examine that I haven't yet figured out, so that next time, hopefully, I can prevent a situation from happening where I revert back to an old behavior that doesn't feel good for me anymore.
I love what you share, because a lot of times, like especially like when people scroll through the social media, and a lot of times they see like all these, like people who are portraying that they have such a beautiful life, everything is so just peachy, and then the average person just looking and saying, what the fuck is wrong with me, right? How come I'm not having that life? But we are all humans, so obviously we go through different issues ourselves, and it's all about just not about the fall, but about how you can rise up and keep going no matter what.
Absolutely. I'll tell you a tip. So I send about 300 or more people texts randomly, like messages or whatever. And that came about, and a lot of those people are coaches, or they're in the healing space of some sort. And that came about because I realized, like, there's this it's easy to fall into that comparison trap. But at the end of the day, if you really are doing the work, you know that we are all hot mess expresses sometimes, and we all need to be reminded that it's a journey. And so I send people that, because I never want anybody to think that, hey, I have to portray that I have it all figured out, or more importantly, I have to suffer alone. Because I do see a lot of people in the coaching industry, now that they have a platform, they feel like they have to look and present a certain way, which is fine. If I showed up every day crying and messy, that's right. I'm not creating trust, obviously.
Absolutely.
But if I'm doing the work and I'm just sharing the process and stuff, that is truth. That's real. And I want other people to recognize that they're seen, and that they don't have to have it all figured out, because none of us do.
None of us do. Yeah. That's why we are here. We are still here, because we haven't figured out it all.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Totally. I love it. This is such a great topic. I'm curious, is there been a situation where you've had to be vulnerable that felt kind of icky, sticky to you? Either one of you?
Yes, a lot of them. Even now, I mean, like, it's like the neighbors listen to me, almost every time. People on cars and bikes, like when they whatever, people listen to me. But I'm fine with that. Like, they listen to the good, they listen to the bad, but I'm fine with that. It's because I'm in the middle of the city. Everybody listens to everything and everybody talks about it. But it's one of those things where, like, it makes me grow. In the beginning, it was a little bit different, because in the beginning, I feel like, because I always told myself, I don't care about what people think about me. I don't care about this. I don't care about that. But then I would always try to kind of, in a certain way, not pipe up too much in terms of the bad stuff. But of course, on the good stuff, I'd always be like, oh, no, whatever, right? But I just came to a point when, in 2022, when I talked about that second trauma in the restaurant, when that happened, I said, you know what, like, fuck it. Like, literally, like, I just said fuck it because I got fucked when I was a kid in a way like that in a school. And then I got fucked twice in a job as well. Once, yeah, like 2 jobs in the UK. And then I got fucked in a bus in Portugal, and I got fucked in a restaurant in Morocco. So it's like in every single country I've been in that I lived, I got publicly humiliated in some sort of way, whether if it was in a school, whether if it was in a restaurant, whether if it was like when I was working and I got fired and all that shit. Like, whatever. Like, and I needed to be like that, like 3 or 4 times to just simply understand, like, fuck it. Like, completely fuck it. You're not gonna live forever, and people are not gonna remember about you forever. Unless you're some fucking Einstein or some shit, whatever. But, like, but still, like good energy brings good energy. Bad energy brings bad energy, right? And that's a universal law, for fuck's sake. Like, that's a universal fucking law. So, like, that is what it is, right? And so it just ends up being like, no matter what you do, you cannot go against those things, right? And so if those things end up happening to us, number one thing is reframe that. So it doesn't happen to us, it happens for us, right? It doesn't happen to hurt us, it happens for our growth, right? And this is all pretty and stuff, and oh my god, oh wow, such a beautiful quote. Yeah, fuck all that. Fuck all that. No. Like, just stick to what actually matters, which is the actual reframing your mindset. Okay? Forget about the aesthetics and the beauty, leave that to Instagram and TikTok. Forget about the real, the reality, the authentic, the honesty, right? That's what matters, right? Reframing your actual mindset, sticking to it, that's the most important thing, right? And being vulnerable with it, because the number one way for you to grow in anything you do is not only self-reflection, but it's you being honest with yourself. You have to be honest with yourself. If you're not honest with yourself, it's never going to work, right? You have to be honest. Honesty is very important. Looking yourself in the mirror, and I'm not going to say that's going to work like first time, right? It's not going to be like a first time wonder hit, right? But like practicing it, because it's like there's this quote as well where it says, like, you do not get courage by shouting affirmations in the mirror and clicking your fingers and abracadabra, 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 and then things fall in your hand. What you're gonna get is you're gonna get the opportunity to make that a reality, right? You're gonna get the opportunity to make that a reality, for you to do it yourself, right? Because whether you're religious or not, in religion, in the Bible, it says, like, God does not help people who don't help themselves, right? In the quantum field, in the universe, ask, believe, and receive, right? But you're not going to receive. You're not going to receive it done in your hand. You're going to receive the opportunity for you to do it, right? Simple. Because in the quantum field, you already have everything you desire. You just have to match that vibration, right? So if you want to feel vulnerable, or not feel vulnerable, but like if you want to be powerful in your vulnerability, if you want to be powerful in your life, you have to match the type of person that will be like that. And Irina knows this, obviously, but you have to be the embodiment of it, right? I in an instance was not the embodiment, because I thought I was the embodiment, but then my actions thought otherwise. But your words and your actions and the way you walk and everything, you have to be the full embodiment of it. I'm not saying for you to be perfect. I'm not saying for you to know everything. Because again, nobody knows everything. I don't care if you're Einstein. Again, right? But it's all about, you try your best to be the embodiment of the so-called things that you desire. And I can guarantee you that things will appear, opportunities will appear for you to take completely.
So I was looking up a quote, but I couldn't find it. But I do want to touch on something that I think is really important that your community hears, that I tell people all the time. There is a difference between not caring what other people think and dismissing other people's feelings. And the only reason I say that is I'm very empowered, right? I walk in as I am, but I do give consideration to people. And I mean, at the end of the day, I express love to anybody, whether you're giving me a dirty look because I have boobs on my arm, or if you're commenting because you like my tattoo, whatever it is, I really do embody to what you were saying, love. And I think that's important because I do see a narrative of people saying, well, I don't care what people think about me, and then having that as like a pass to just treat people poorly. And that is not at all what I'm saying. It's when you truly love yourself, you are able to love anybody regardless of their opinion of you, because it doesn't affect your internal compass and your peace. And so I really just wanted to highlight that before we jump off, because I do see that getting confused a lot, and that's important, especially when you're talking about law of attraction, because energetically, you're right, we absolutely hands down attract what it is we are. So I just want to highlight that.
That's awesome. And I just want to wrap it up all together, just to say, you know, when I speak the word vulnerability, what comes to my mind is the, you know, the real you, right? And that's exactly when you become your real you, then you attract, again, going back to law of attraction, you attract the life that you truly want. You attract the relationship you desire. You attract the opportunities, the business, the vacation, all 9 yards, right? Because once you become who you are, who you acknowledge yourself for, like knowing this is comfortable for you, this is the way you express yourself, this is the way you carry yourself. So once you become that real you, once you become that vulnerable you, that's exactly how life becomes limitless, right? Because you are fearless, right? And the life becomes limitless, and that's the beauty of it. That's all I wanted to say for today. Thank you so much, Kerri, for joining us. Like
Thank
I
you,
said,
Kerri.
come to see us all the time. And we want to know in the comments, please, what do you think about vulnerability? How important it is in your life? So just share, and we will be happy to read and respond to them. And everybody, continue being you, because this is the best version, and that's the best life to live. Bye.